AITA for cutting off my son when he didn't care his mom was in the ICU? After 23 years of sharing a bed, a bank account, and a bathroom with someone. And believe me, the bathroom part is the real test of love. You develop a sixth sense for them. You know when something is off. You feel it before you see it. Like a smell in the air that does not belong on the street. That Tuesday, I felt at the moment I turned onto our street in our quiet suburban neighborhood. I was not supposed to be home. My conference in Denver wrapped up a day ahead of schedule. Apparently, the keynote speaker had a personal emergency. Personally, I think he just looked out at the audience and lost the will to live. In any case, I caught the first flight back. I did not call. I did not text. I figured I would surprise Laura. Maybe pick up her favorite Thai food on the way. Maybe I could finally sit across from my wife at dinner without a laptop between us. I was feeling good. I should have known better. The first thing I noticed was Brandon's car in the driveway. Brandon is my son. He is 26. He has been married to Kelsey for 2 years. They have their own place across town. A very nice condo, I might add, that I helped furnish. So seeing his car at my house on a Tuesday afternoon was not just unusual, it was strange. Brandon does not do pop-ins. Brandon barely does scheduled visits. I sat in the car for a moment and asked nobody in particular, "Rick, why is your son's car in your driveway on a Tuesday?" I did not have an answer for myself, so I grabbed my carry-on and headed for the front door. The second thing I noticed was the silence. It was not a peaceful quiet. Not that kick your shoes off kind of quiet. This was a thick, heavy, unsettling silence. A silence with weight. I pushed the door open and walked in. Brandon and Kelsey were sitting in the living room together on the sofa. And here is the part that still gives me a chill when I think about it. They were not watching television. They were not on their phones. They were just sitting like two people in a waiting room who have already accepted whatever news is coming. Brandon looked up first. And I want you to pay very close attention to what I am about to tell you, because this detail changed everything for me. He was not surprised to see me. Think about that. Your father, who is supposed to be in Denver, walks through the front door a day early and you do not even flinch. Not a flicker. No. Dad, what are you doing here? Nothing. Just a slow blink and a look I can only describe as calculated. Kelsey smiled. And I am telling you, that smile had no business being on anyone's face that afternoon. I said, "Brandon, what is going on? Where is your mother?" He cleared his throat and said, "Dad, hey, we were just about to call you." Seriously, I said it flatly. It was not a question. Mom had an episode this morning. He told me she was at Mercy General Hospital, but that she was stable, so I did not hear anything else after Mercy General Hospital. I was back in my car in 11 seconds. I know because I counted. Grief does that. It makes your brain cling to the most useless details while the important ones are trying to kill you. I called Scott on the way. Scott Barnes has been my best friend since 1987. This man has seen me through a divorce scare, 2 recessions, and the absolute catastrophe that was my attempt at a goatee in 2009. If there is anyone in this world who will give it to me straight, it is Scott. He picked up on the second ring. "Rick, what is wrong, brother?" "Laura is in the hospital," I said. Mercy General Hospital. I just got home and Brandon and Kelsey were sitting in my living room like they already knew the end of a movie. Total silence on his end. Then, "What do you mean? They already knew." "Scott, my son did not even react when I walked through the door. I was supposed to be in Denver." Another pause. Then, very quietly, he said, "Rick, I need you to stay calm." "I am calm," I said. "No," he said, "you are driving. That is not the same thing." He was not wrong. Mercy General Hospital was 15 minutes from my house. I made it in 9 minutes. I am not answering any questions about that. Dr. Emily Reeves met me at the nurse's station. She was a calm woman in her late 50s, the kind of doctor who delivers difficult news with a steady gaze and an unwavering voice. I appreciated that. I needed steady right then. She said, "Mr. Thompson, I am glad you are here. Your wife was brought in this morning by your son. She was presenting with severe disorientation, organ stress, and elevated toxicity markers in her blood work." I said, "Toxicity markers?" She replied, "Yes, we are running a full panel, but I want to be frank with you. The pattern we are seeing is not consistent with a sudden illness. It is suggestive of something that has been building over time." That word hit me like a closed fist. I held onto the edge of the nurse's counter and said very carefully, "Doctor, Are you telling me someone has been deliberately causing harm to my wife? She held my gaze and said, I am telling you we need more answers, and I think you do too. I went in to see Laura, and believe me, I have seen my wife in every conceivable state. I have seen her laugh so hard she cried. I have seen her so angry she made me seriously reevaluate my life choices. I have seen her exhausted, radiant, heartbroken, and everything in between. I was not prepared for what I saw in that room. She looked hollowed out, as if someone had turned a dial inside her and slowly, quietly drained everything that made her Laura. The machine beeped, the floor dripped, and my wife, the woman who once chased a contractor out of our kitchen with a wooden spoon for doing a shoddy tile job, lay there looking impossibly small. I sat next to her, took her hand, and made her a promise. I do not make promises lightly. Ask anyone who knows me. I said, I am here, and I am not leaving until I know exactly what happened to you. I went back to the waiting room. Brandon and Kelsey had arrived. Of course they had. Brandon stood up and said, Dad, we should talk. There is a lot you do not know. I held up a hand, just one, and something in my face must have communicated exactly where we stood, because he stopped mid-sentence. I said, Not yet. Then I walked to the corner of the waiting room, pulled out my phone, and started doing the one thing they never expected. I started locking every single account they had access to. Every single one. And as the notifications started hitting their phones, because I knew they would, the first thing I watched was Kelsey's face. That smile she had been wearing all afternoon vanished. Just like that. We were talking, and it was in that exact moment that I understood what was happening to my wife. I had just kicked the hornet's nest. The question was, how many hornets were inside? Let me tell you something about denial. Denial is comfortable. Denial is cozy. Denial will pour you a cup of coffee, sit across from you, and tell you everything is fine. That you are overreacting. That you are paranoid for thinking the people you love are capable of the very thing your gut is screaming at you. I lived in denial for probably longer than I care to admit, but sitting in that hospital parking lot at 9:43 p.m., with my wife hooked up to machines 30 feet above me, and the look in my son's eyes seared into my memory, I evicted that tenant for good. I changed the locks and everything and called Scott. He answered before the first ring finished. Talk to me, he said. She looks terrible, Scott, I said, and my voice made an embarrassing sound on that last word that I will not detail. The doctor used the word toxicity, said it was a build-up, not sudden, but gradual. I heard him exhale slowly. Rick, gradual means deliberate. I know what it means, I said. And Brandon and Kelsey were at the house. They are in the waiting room right now. Silence. Then Scott said something I will never forget as long as I live. He said, Brother, you need to think very hard about who had access to Laura's food, her drinks, her supplements. Every day, for the last few months, you need to think about who was close. And that is when it hit me. 4 months ago, Laura twisted her ankle coming down the stairs. Nothing major. A bad sprain. But Brandon had stepped in almost immediately, suggesting that Kelsey, who worked part-time and had a flexible schedule, could come over every morning to help Laura with breakfast and her supplements while I was at work. At the time, I thought it was generous. I actually told Scott that maybe I had been wrong about the kid. I would like to go back in time and slap myself. I went back inside. Brandon was standing by the vending machine, arms crossed, wearing an expression I can only describe as a man trying very hard to look innocent and failing spectacularly. Kelsey was sitting with her phone face down on her lap. Now, you need to understand the significance of this. Kelsey is never off her phone. The woman is physically attached to that device. I once saw her check her phone during a Thanksgiving grace. So a phone face down meant she was either expecting a call she did not want me to see, or she had already gotten one. I sat down directly across from them. Brandon said, Dad, I know how this looks. I said, Do you, Brandon? Explain to me exactly how you think this looks, because I am very curious. He shifted. Mama's been having some health issues for a while. We were just trying to help. Kelsey was coming over every morning, making sure she ate, took her vitamins. Her vitamins, I repeated. Yeah. Which vitamins? He blinked. What? I said, which vitamins? She takes 3 different supplements. Which ones was Kelsey giving her? He looked at Kelsey. Kelsey looked at her lap, and in that instant, that 3-second exchange, it told me everything I needed to know. I stood up and said, I am going to need you both to go home. Brandon said my name once, quietly, the way my own father used to say it to me when I was about to do something I could not take back. Go home. Not even close. I sat in that waiting room with a cup of that awful hospital coffee and did what any sensible man would do when he suspected his son and daughter-in-law of causing this harm to his wife. I started digging. I went through every bank statement for the last 6 months, and look, I am not a forensic accountant. I am a 54-year-old man who still finds online banking a little suspicious, but even I could see something was wrong. There were withdrawals. Small at first. 200 here, 350 there. Amounts you do not notice, you just feel. But added up, they came to nearly $11,000 over 5 months, from a joint account Laura and I shared that Brandon had limited access to for emergencies. $11,000. I called Scott at 2 in the morning. He answered like it was noon. I said, $11,000, without even a hello. From which account? The joint family account. Small, steady withdrawals, like someone who knew exactly how to fly under the radar. Scott was quiet for a moment. Then, Rick, that is not impulsive. That is planned. That is someone who sat down and thought about how to do it without getting caught. My son, I said. And I will be honest, those 2 words nearly broke me right there in the waiting room at 2 in the morning. My son sat down and planned this. We do not know that for sure yet, Scott said carefully. Scott, I know, I said quietly. I know. The next morning, Dr. Emily Reeves found me exactly where she had left me in the waiting room, looking like a man who had been through a war and lost. She sat down next to me, which doctors do not usually do, and I knew. She said, Mr. Thompson, the full panel came back. I said, tell me straight. She explained, your wife has elevated levels of a compound consistent with the long-term ingestion of a harmful substance. The levels suggest consistent exposure over several months. Her kidneys are under significant stress. We have started treatment, and I want to be clear. We caught this in time. She has an excellent chance of a full recovery. I closed my eyes for just a second. Then I said, Doctor, if someone were doing this deliberately, how would they administer it? She paused, and then very carefully said, it could be introduced through food, a drink, supplements, especially ones that dissolve easily and do not have a distinct taste. I heard Brandon's voice in my head. Kelsey was coming over every morning to make sure she ate and took her vitamins. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor, and Dr. Emily Reeves put a hand on my arm. Mr. Thompson, I need to make a call. I said, first I called my attorney. Then I called the bank and had them freeze, restructure, and password protect every remaining account with codes that only my attorney and I had access to. I removed Brandon's emergency access. I removed the automatic transfers. I removed everything. Within 20 minutes, my phone started ringing. Brandon 4 times. Kelsey twice. Then a text from Brandon that read, Dad, what did you do? Why can I not access anything? Call me right now. Right now in all caps and everything. I stared at that text for a long time. This was a young man who, just at Christmas, had hugged me at the door and told me I was the best father he could have ever asked for. I believed him. I was immensely proud of it. I might have even told Scott about it. I texted him back a single sentence. You should have thought about that before you harmed my wife. I put the phone in my pocket and went upstairs to sit with Laura, because she was the only thing that mattered. She was going to wake up. Dr. Emily Reeves had said so, and when she did, I was going to be the first face she saw. But there was something else now, something cold and focused settling in my chest where the fear used to be, because I still did not know why. $11,000 and a wife in this condition do not just happen. People do not do something that calculated, that patient, without an endgame. I needed to find out what their endgame was. I called Scott one more time that night, and he picked up immediately. How is she? Stable. On treatment. Reeves says she will recover. Thank God, he breathed. Scott, I said, I need you to do something for me. I need you to find out if Laura has changed anything lately. A will, an insurance policy, anything with my name or Brandon's on it. Silence. Then, Rick, you think this is about money? I think, I said slowly, that my son needed $11,000 so badly that he took it without asking. And I think whatever he needed it for, that was just the down payment. Scott exhaled. I will make some calls, he said. I did not know it yet, but by morning, Scott would find something that would make $11,000 look like pocket change, and it would change everything. Revenge is a dish best served cold, but I prefer it just right, warm enough to sting, precise enough to leave a mark, and delivered with a smile they will be trying to forget for the rest of their lives. Let me tell you about the truth. The truth does not always arrive dramatically. It does not always kick the door in, flip the table, and announce itself with thunder and lightning. Sometimes, and this is the really staggering part, the truth just slips in quietly through a phone call on an ordinary Thursday morning while you are drinking terrible hospital coffee and watching the sun come up through the waiting room window. That is how it came for me. Scott called at 7:14 a.m. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock, willing the minutes to go faster so I could go back in and check on Laura. He did not say hello, just, "Rick, brace yourself." I put my coffee down and said, "Tell me." 6 weeks before Laura ended up in the ICU, she had visited an estate attorney, alone, without telling me, which, knowing Laura, meant she was planning a surprise. Laura was an operator. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas, she could run a military operation around a dinner party. What she had done was update her life insurance policy. The original policy had Brandon listed as the secondary beneficiary, a standard thing we had set up years ago when he was a kid. Laura had gone in to update it, to remove Brandon entirely and redirect everything to a charitable trust she had been quietly building for 2 years, a literacy foundation for underprivileged kids. Something she had never told me about because she wanted to present it as a fully formed organization before she did. That was Laura. She never did anything by halves. The policy was worth $2,300,000. Brandon had found out. I do not know how, and that detail almost does not matter, but he had found out his mother was about to cut him out of $2,300,000. And instead of picking up the phone and having a conversation like an adult, he and Kelsey sat down and decided the most sensible course of action was to make sure Laura did not live long enough to finish the paperwork. The attorney had a 30-day window to process the case. Laura had 30 days left in that window when she collapsed. 30 days. My wife had 30 days left, according to their plan. I sat with that information for a long time. I did not move. I did not speak. I just sat in that plastic waiting room chair and let the full weight of it settle on my chest like a stone. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, walked to the window, and made a decision. I was not going to be loud about this. I was not going to be sloppy. I was not going to confront Brandon in a hospital hallway and give him a chance to lawyer up on my dime and turn this into a circus. I was going to be methodical. I called my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Diane Powell, who had been practicing for 30 years and had the energy of someone who enjoyed watching people face consequences. I told her everything, the withdrawals, the supplements, the insurance policy, the timeline, all of it. She was silent for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "Rick, do not touch anything in that house. Do not confront either of them. Do not post anything. Do not say anything. Do not hint at anything. Can you do that?" "I can do that," I said. "Good," she said, "because I am going to make sure that when this lands, it lands completely. No cracks, no escape routes." I said, "Diane, I want them to feel every inch of this." She said, "Honey, when I am done, they will notice the space." I almost smiled. Almost. The next 72 hours were the longest of my life. Laura was getting better. Dr. Emily Reeves was cautiously optimistic. The treatment was working. Her kidney function was stabilizing, and on the second day, she opened her eyes, looked at me, and said in the hoarsest, most exhausted voice I had ever heard, "Rick, you look terrible." And I laughed. I actually laughed. Out loud. In the ICU. The nurse looked at me like I had lost my mind. Maybe I had. But to hear Laura's sarcasm, that particular brand of loving, devastating sarcasm that I had taken for granted for 23 years, it was like someone had reached into my chest and restarted something. I leaned forward and said, "You are in the ICU and you are critiquing my appearance?" She said, her voice very faint but clear, "Someone has to." I held her hand and did not let go for a very long time. I did not tell her everything yet. She needed to get better first. The full truth could wait, but I told her she was safe. I told her I knew what happened, and I told her it was being handled. She just stared at me for a long time with those sharp eyes of hers. the ones that had always seen right through me, and said, "It was Brandon, was it not?" It was not a question, it was a statement. I did not answer. I just squeezed her hand tighter. She closed her eyes and said quietly, "I always knew that boy had all of my worst qualities and none of my best." Even half-conscious in a hospital bed, Laura Thompson was the most formidable woman I had ever known. On the fourth day, Diane called with something that just floored me. Scott, bless that man, had quietly obtained surveillance footage from a pharmacy 2 towns over. Brandon had purchased a specific brand of supplement on 3 separate occasions over 4 months, always paying cash, always alone, except once. The third visit, when the pharmacy's exterior camera caught Kelsey waiting in the car. The supplement contained trace amounts of a compound that, when administered in high enough doses consistently over time, would produce the exact toxicity profile Dr. Emily Reeves had found in Laura's blood work. Diane also had the bank records. She had a digital trail of the withdrawals. She had the estate attorney confirming the timeline of the insurance update and Brandon's subsequent inquiries, because Brandon, in what I can only describe as an act of astonishing audacity, had called the estate attorney's office, pretending to be Laura's personal assistant, to inquire about the status of the policy changes. He had left a callback number, his own cell phone number. I will give you a moment to let that sink in. My son, this man who had planned a months-long effort to harm his mother with the patience of a chess grandmaster, had called the estate attorney from his own cell phone. When Scott told me, I just stared at the wall for 10 seconds and then said, "Scott, have I raised a criminal mastermind or a complete idiot?" Scott replied, "Brother, the answer is somehow both." They came to the hospital together on the 5th day, carrying flowers. Flowers. And wearing the expressions of 2 people who had decided a charm offensive was their best remaining strategy. Brandon walked in first, saw me in the hallway, and immediately put on a smile that did not come close to reaching his eyes. He asked, "Dad, how is she? We have been so worried." I looked at him, then at Kelsey, then back at him, and I said, "She is awake. She is talking. She is going to make a full recovery." I saw something flicker in his eyes. It was not relief, it was not joy. It was a very quick, brief recalculation, the kind you do when a plan has failed and you need to figure out what is next. Kelsey said, "Oh, that is such wonderful news, Rick. The police are on their way," I said. Just like that. In a quiet, even tone, the same tone I would use to mention it was supposed to rain on Friday. Brandon's face went so pale so fast, it was almost medically impressive. He said, "What?" "Attorney Diane Powell filed everything this morning," I said. "The pharmacy receipts, the bank statements, the call to the estate attorney, the toxicology report from Dr. Emily Reeves, everything. Every single document in one very tidy package." Kelsey made a sound I can only describe as a person's composure physically leaving their body. Brandon said, "Dad, just listen for a second, okay? Just let me." "No, because for all of it, I am still his father. There is nothing you can say to me right now. There is not a sentence in the English language that will fix this, so I need you to stop talking." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I said, "The flowers are a nice touch, though. Laura will appreciate them coming from someone else." They were arrested in the hospital parking lot. I watched from the window. Diane had timed it with the precision of a woman who understands that public optics matter. They were still holding the flowers when the officers approached. Brandon tried to talk his way out of it. He has always believed his voice is his most powerful weapon. Kelsey was silent, which suggested she was already planning a plea deal. Scott came up beside me at the window. I do not even know when he arrived. He just materialized, the way he always does when it matters most. We stood there together, watching. He asked, "How do you feel?" I thought about it honestly. Then he said, "And Laura?" I looked down the hall toward her room. Through the small, rectangular window in her door, I could see her outline on the bed, the monitors, the dim light. I said, "Laura is going to be fine. Laura was always going to be fine. She is the strongest person I know, and she married me, which proves she can survive anything." Scott laughed. A real, genuine laugh. It bounced off the hallway walls, and for a moment, the waiting was over. 3 months later, Laura came home. She walked through the front door on a Saturday morning in October when the light had that specific golden quality of fall, and she just stood in the hallway, looking around as if cataloging everything she had almost lost. Then she turned to me and said, "Rick, the kitchen needs a new coat of paint." I said, "Absolutely not. I just painted it 2 years ago." She said, "The white is the wrong shade. There is only one shade of white, Laura," she said, pointing at the wall with the authority of a woman who had looked death in the eye. "That is not white. That is the color of a bureaucratic apology." I looked at the wall, looked at her, pulled out my phone, and called a painter. Brandon and Kelsey faced charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and financial fraud. Attorney Diane Powell worked closely with the prosecution to build the case with the energy of someone who had waited her entire career for a case this airtight. The trial lasted 11 days. The jury's verdict took 4 hours. They were handed considerable sentences. I will not tell you the exact number because, frankly, no number will ever feel like enough. What I will tell you is that when the verdict was read, I was sitting in the courtroom next to Laura, who was holding my hand with a grip that felt like steel. And when it was over, she leaned over to me and said very quietly, "I want Thai food." I asked, "Right now?" She replied, "I have been thinking about Thai food for 3 months, Rick. Do not test me." So we got Thai food. Scott came over, Diane came over. Dr. Emily Reeves came over, who Laura had apparently completely charmed during her recovery. We sat around a table, and we ate, and we laughed, and I watched my wife gesture emphatically while telling a story and thought, there she is. There's Laura. At the beginning of this, I said I came home early and wished the house had been empty. I take it back. I am glad I came home. I am glad I walked through that door. I am glad I saw what I saw and felt what I felt and did what I did. Because if I had come home a day later, if the conference had run its full schedule, if I had stayed in Denver one more night, Laura would not have made it, and I would have spent the rest of my life not knowing why. So no, I do not wish the house had been empty. I wish my son had been the man I thought I had raised. But you do not get to control who people become in the dark. You only get to control what you do when the lights come on. I came home, I turned on the lights, and I made sure every single person in that house faced the consequences of their actions. That is my job. That has always been the job. Comment. This story really stayed with me, and I hope it gave you something meaningful to think about, too. It reminded me of how important it is to trust your instincts when something feels wrong in your own life. Setting healthy boundaries is an act of self-respect, not selfishness. We all have a responsibility to protect the people we love while still facing difficult truths. Healing becomes possible the moment we choose peace over resentment. Never ignore that quiet voice inside when it tells you something is off. Kindness is beautiful, but it should never come at the expense of your safety or well-being. I believe real strength shows up when we handle pain with both firmness and grace. Take time to truly check in on your loved ones and make sure they are okay. I hope this encourages you to live with more awareness, courage, and compassion every single day. If you liked it, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.